30-year-old man who died last month at one of the UK's leading hospitals would still be alive if Martha's rule, which gives the right to a second opinion, had been in place, his father has claimed. Jay Patel says his son Balram was given unsuitable treatment which had not previously worked, and he was refused a second opinion. He's released an audio call with nurses in which he tried to persuade them that the oral medicine was not working.
Conversation was oral would work. We've come home and it hasn't worked.
Okay, let me feed that back to them.
It hasn't worked, and he's putting on weight, and now he's desaturating at a hell of a rate, and he's struggling breathing, and we're saying, you know what, up it from 180 milligrams to 200 milligrams, and that's going to make all the difference.
Well, we have to just see if that will work.
We don't have the privilege of seeing it will work.
Okay then, I'll get back to the consultant.
Well, responding to his claims, a spokesperson for Guy's and St Thomas's NHS Foundation Trust said, "We wish to extend our deepest sympathies to Balram's family. Balram had incredibly complex health needs and had been under our care throughout his life, during which he was cared for by an extensive multidisciplinary team. Any concerns the family have will be fully investigated." Well, to discuss his son's case, Jay Patel joins me now. Jay, obviously, I want to give you our condolences for the death of your son. And you blame the system in a way, don't you? First, because it's clear from that message that you were convinced what was the right and what was the wrong course of action, and that the wrong course of action had been followed.
Well, yeah, basically they themselves convinced, because on the 28th of July they made a note. They put him on IV diuretics because it all didn't work. And then when we asked them on the 30th, when there was a note on the door of the ward to say start wearing masks, and there was COVID on the ward, they decided, and we agreed with them, the best thing is for Balram to come home and have treatment at home and continue with the IV diuretics, which they started to implement. They put a line in, a PICC line to assist with that. Then they found out the actual district nurses don't honour or don't have the facility to support IV diuretics, so they put subcutaneous pumps on him, one on each thigh, and they continue with that. And then they found out that they don't respect those either. So in our borough, the district nurses don't employ either of those two forms of medication. So then they said to me, go back to oral diuretics. I said, well, they never worked in the hospital 5 days ago. How are they going to work now? You went ahead and put oral IV on because they didn't work. You look for district nurses. So we actually went in quite a few different places to provide them, the nurses, to give the medication at home, but they didn't approach them. Well, they didn't approach one party, the other one they didn't follow properly. They agreed to discharge us on the proviso that we'd got full support. I said, no, I want a second opinion, because I cannot believe anybody in their right mind would allow oral diuretics for Balram, because they never worked. And so that's what they did. They discharged us at home with the oral diuretics, and then you heard the conversation a few days later when he was really, really very unwell. And I asked them, pleaded them to please reconsider. And they said they'll come back to me, and they never did.
And the reason that you're highlighting this now, apart from the fact that you clearly have very, very strong opinions about the treatment that your son has, is this specific issue of Martha's Law, whereby people in your situation who are convinced that they're getting the wrong treatment should have, in the future, the right to a second opinion. Martha's
Law's part of it. Balram was failed because of 5 or 6 different things. If they'd given us a second opinion, I'm sure he'd be here now. But example, he went into A&E. They spent 6 hours after seeing his lungs are saturated before they started IV diuretics. What were they waiting for? And it didn't end there. He died at 4 o'clock in the morning after they started giving the IV at 1. At 4:40, I went downstairs to see the coroner, and they had even the wrong cause of death. They never even put pulmonary edema on his death certificate. I had to fight after my son had just died to convince them the true cause of death.
And this is one of the things that 99% of people in your situation, in the first throes of grief, the thought of battling an establishment is overwhelming, and a lot of people don't take that fight up, even when they're convinced that something has gone drastically wrong and that lessons do need to be learnt. It's just too difficult to take on that fight.
It is. I mean, Balram's 30 years old. We had a lot of issues, but my philosophy throughout all of his hospitalisation is I'm here to get my son home, not to fault find. after Balram passed away, I can't bring my son back, unfortunately. What I can try and do is make sure that nobody else goes through what Balram did. And so that's why we formed Patients' Lives Matter. Patients' lives do matter. I've got an incident right now of a young lad who's literally been told they're going to turn his life machine off because they're saying that he's medically dead. Yet his family are convinced that he's not. Now they don't know what to do. What can they do? And that's what I've tried to do. I've tried to say, enough is enough. I love the NHS, please don't get me wrong. My son was here 30 years because of them. Unfortunately, he's not here today because of the same NHS. The way it self-regulates, in my opinion, is not right. To self-regulate doesn't make sense because it's flawed from the outset. Secondly, when something goes wrong, you just read the article of the newspaper saying, by the way, we'd look into failures. Why didn't you look into failures 6 weeks ago? My baby would still be with me if you did. To come to me now and say, OK, he's died, let's see what we did wrong, is not on. It's not the way forward, and that's what seems to be going on.
And apart from Martha's Law, which, as you've explained, might have given you more power to insist on a second opinion, but might not have saved Balram's life. What do you think needs to be done urgently? If you had the Secretary of State for Health sitting here or the head of the NHS, what would you be telling them?
I'd say that unfortunately for a long while we've taken the easy option. The easy option is when there is a fault, put an algorithm together, settle a claim, pay from taxpayers' money and move on.
Move on, nothing to see.
Nothing to see, nothing to answer. 2007, my son had an allergy band cut off, which said hyperallergic to propofol. And the consultant cut it off and I said, please don't. And he gave my son a full dose of propofol. Balram arrested in front of my wife and I. He died for a minute. Eventually, when he came through, I took this to the chief executive of the NHS. Guess who he got to report? The guy that gave the medication.
The consultant.
The consultant. And what did he say? First of all, the senior registrar didn't follow proper protocol when he put the allergy band on. Well, actually, when we went in at midnight, he checked my son's notes, checked he'd twice relapsed because of the propofol, and they resuscitated him. So he followed proper protocol. My question is, what proper protocol did you follow when you cut it off spontaneously without even looking at any notes? And when I've said don't. So that was his first question. His second point was, my son wasn't allergic to propofol. Well, before he went for that surgery, all the notes say propofol. After the surgery, all the notes say propofol. And guess what's on his discharge letter under allergies? Propofol.
But there is this culture, isn't there, that it's easy to spot, but it's difficult to cure when there is a culture where certain people in certain organisations, what they say isn't necessarily questioned. And that certainly seems to be the case with a lot of hospitals where the consultants are sort of treated as demigods. We've had a lot of stories about this recently, and whistleblowers aren't listened to.
Sure. And we've got through Patients' Lives Matter, over 100 different people have come on to me and said stories which ordinarily you think this is mind-blowing, but in the real world it isn't. Something needs to change. Patients' Life Matters out there. Send me some emails if you've had any incidents. I'd love to take this forward. I'd love to speak to anybody about, but my view is we need to do two things. Implement a system whereby they do not self-regulate because it doesn't work. And secondly, when there is an issue, deal with it at the time it arises, not retrospectively, like in my son's case.
Well, Jay Patel, thank you so much for coming in to talk to us today. And obviously we hope that investigation that has been promised by the hospital will certainly give some answers or at least provide some food for thought and potentially some change.
Oh, I know what's going to happen with the answers. They're going to come along and say it was all OK, but we know it wasn't. But I wish them with it. That's not my main banter. My main banter is we need to stop what's happened to Balram.
All right. Well, Jay Patel, thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you for taking the time.